Thank you for tuning in to another episode of my Veterans to Success podcast. You probably know by now, my mission is to help 1 million veterans and entrepreneur business owners achieve the dreams, goals, and aspirations they deserve. That is why I created the Veterans to Success podcast, because I get to interview guys, men and women, who want to share their fascinating stories with you about their time before, during and after their time in the military, so you can benefit and overcome your challenges. So sit back, relax, and get ready to be mesmerized, astounded, and entertained. Hello and welcome to another edition of Veterans to Success. This is the podcast that really deep dives into veterans who really made it a success after leaving the military, or even the guys that are still in, and I just want to share the stories and go into the life, because I think that that's the variety of life. And today I've got with us very own Barbara Thompson. Barbara, as you know. Hello, Barbara. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me, Joe.
It's brilliant, and I know your story, and I've been on a few podcasts as guests, and they give in the build-up, they tell most of our story, and I don't do it like that, because I want the reveal to happen as we're going along. All I can say is I know your story, and it's fabulous. So let's just dive straight in, shall we? And tell me a little bit about your life before the military. Where were you? What was going on in your life, and what was happening at your younger days?
Yeah, sure. So I grew up obviously in the United States, in the middle of the country, in a state called Oklahoma. I grew up in a fairly small town, raised by a single mother. I have two brothers, one younger. They were both athletes, and they always inspired me. And I think both of them gave me a really tough time and actually made me a tougher person.
I was going to say, actually, because I know that people make comments when there's one boy with a few girls, but being one girl with a few boys, that must have been tough at times.
It was, and I loved every moment of it. Even though I did, of course, go through the emotional swings of a normal female teenager, I felt like my brothers really kept me logical, and they were, even though they were hard on me, they were very encouraging. It's almost like they held me to a high standard. And then they also, of course, were able to give me the insight of, the teenage male or the young male mind, which I thought was really helpful as, a person navigating those waters. But they were really great athletes, really tough. I think athletics is something that we, were attracted to. It kept us busy, and it also was just something to work towards. We were not well off financially, and that was quite difficult many times as we grew up. In fact, going into my junior year of high school, we were homeless. We did not have a home of our own, and I found myself sharing a bedroom, and in fact a bed, with my mom. And Joe, when I read through your story and having talked to you, it comes to mind now that, wow, that was such an opportunity. It was such an opportunity, because my family and we didn't have those little squabbles, because what was most important was always front of mind. And my mother was very good at telling me, and she lived this out. She would say, "Hey, if you are going through this, can you imagine what it's equipping you for?" And
That's
so very early, she instilled that in me. Did I ever think I would end up in the military? No, I had no idea, where my life was going. I just took it step by step, and I tried not to run away from challenge. In fact, I tried to go towards challenge. Even when, and I'm sure that you've had this in your life, like people who care about you kind of second guess your decisions a little bit. Like, why would you want to do that? But it's turned out so fantastic. And the military was like home for me.
Yeah, and it sounds like you really had a great grounding, and your mum must have been a pillar, a rock, really, to even. I've never been homeless, right? So I can only imagine what that's like. And as a small girl, sharing a bed with your mum because you know you've hit on hard times, your mum must have been tremendously strong and brave to be able to just tell you, look, come on, we can do this, and you can do whatever you want.
Yeah, it's hard to say how she was feeling inside at the moment or
Yeah,
at
yeah,
that moment,
yeah, yeah.
but what she displayed was a faith that thought anything was possible. And that's the words that she spoke to us. And I think that my brothers and I have gone on to live that out, based on that. And we had also had great grandparent figures that fed into our lives on a daily basis. And it takes a community, as they say, and I was very fortunate in the relationship um, area, not so much in the financial, but I think that set me up for success.
Uh, Thank you. And it's great because I know you referred to my story, but I believe that if it if it doesn't kill you, it'll make you stronger. And that's what my mum
It's
always used to
true.
say to me. Yeah. And I think that everyone has got the equivalent of the mountain to fall down
Yes,
and then climb back up. And it sounds like you really did.
yes.
So what was the point, right, where you said military? That sounds interesting. Let's give that a
Right.
go.
Yeah, so I was in college. I was a sophomore during 9/11, and I did have some family members in the military. So that was very much a turning point for me kind of mentally, thinking I had never thought about the military, to be honest with you. And then my older brother, Ryan, he was in the Oklahoma National Guard as an infantryman, and he went over in 2003 for the invasion of Iraq. He was gone when I graduated from college. Um, and then, so I went on to graduate school still, as I said before, not necessarily having a 5 year or 10-year plan, but following my heart and going towards challenge I felt was interesting and the desires that I felt like were placed on my heart. So, in graduate school, we have to, as a psychologist, that is, there's a year where you're still technically in school, but you have to serve somewhere as a psychologist in training, and we call that internship.
Yeah.
And I had to choose where to do my internship. And it was at that point when I really had to reflect on who is the population that I feel most called to serve. And seeing my brother's experience with war, that did change him quite significantly. I thought that there was no better population to serve, and that began my search for a service of my own. And I ended up calling the Army home for the next several years.
Yeah, and on a lot of the podcasts that I've done with you guys across the pond, 9/11 was a significant event in the UK, certainly in America. I think that brought it home because you know in the times of conflict when we had Northern Ireland and the Falklands and stuff, uh, America wasn't at the forefront, and the 9/11 sort of said, "Wow, this can happen to us over here." And I think the psyche changed at that point, didn't it?
Yes, for sure. Absolutely. Um, it is not every interview that, because assessment and selection is a big part of my job
Mm.
as an operational psychologist or military psychologist. So, assessing and helping to consult with leadership on who to select for these high performing special operations units. I've heard many times over about how 9/11 affected the psyche of a person. Um, it was that generational event that woke us up to say like,
Mm.
I need, I want to be a part of, making our or keeping our country safe, doing something bigger than myself. So, and I hope we don't always need events like that. I hope that people like you who always are putting the stories of service out there, then just that inkling, that desire that people have to do something bigger than themselves is always alive. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? It's always in there, but sometimes we need either an event in our life or, a relationship to wake that up a little bit.
yeah. And it's when I did the New York Marathon 15 years after my incident, then I visited, I did the New York Marathon and I visited the site 9/11, Ground Zero. And it was a very somber moment for me because there was a hush in the area,
Yes.
that you could just feel the power and the presence, which I think is quite sobering.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so right, you've decided to go for the internship, which is an admirable thing to do because you've got the connection with your brothers. And by the way, you said they were affected, without going into sensitive detail necessarily. How did that manifest itself, and what did you see going on?
Yeah, yeah. So my brother, he's still a motivator for me. We're still very close, and he's actually still in the service. But one thing I remember specifically was he was home, for Christmas, and lots of family members in a small space. And so we're both sleeping on the floor in the living room, and just he was very startled, without reason. And I
Mm,
remember him talking about uh, driving in the city and having to pull over because he started to feel those very strong feelings of feeling
mm,
trapped and anxious. And so
mm.
those were a couple of the ways that just everyday life, those popped up for him. And it's been different. He's had several deployments since that time. So
And yeah, because I get where you're coming from with that, because I know when I left the military and friends of mine, you're still on high alert. And
yes,
and sometimes for no reason whatsoever. Like if you go in a
yes,
crowded place, you're always sitting with your back to the wall so you can see what's going on and that sort of stuff.
right.
Yeah. So yeah, I totally appreciate that. So what happened in the military for you? What was the moment where you just thought, yeah, I'm doing the right thing. This is the place to be.
I think the entire time. I really loved everything about it, and I'm not sure if that's unique or not, but there was always a challenge. There was always something I hadn't done or a school I hadn't been to. I had the privilege of doing training that I think most psychologists or mental health professionals, maybe they wouldn't necessarily want to do,
Hmm.
but I had that opportunity. So I got to do things to give me insight into the mind of the warriors that we're training, like dunker training. So it's a simulated downed helicopter underwater,
Yeah, got it.
at daytime conditions, nighttime conditions. I got to go through SEER school, survive, evade, resist, escape. I got to work at the SEER school. I got to deploy to Gitmo, in support of intelligence operations there. And there were just many things along the way. I mean, everyone I've supported, it's an honor because for me, I'm not one of the brave ones. I'm just there to consult and support. So I've always found it exciting to go to work and um even as so I spent 5 years on active duty and then 2.5 years in the reserves. And then I was a contractor after that time, contract operational psychologist with special operations. And all of it has been extremely rewarding, whether it's helping teams gel more or helping them perform better
Yeah,
or helping the organization become healthier. Um, Helping transform culture, all of those things, as a psychological consultant have been very rewarding. And just personally, I'm married to well, he's recently retired, but Green Beret, and so supporting him throughout his last several deployments, and was my greatest honor, to be honest with you, and supporting him during this transition. You know, he's got a warrior's heart and a warrior's mind,
Yeah.
and now he's out of uniform, and so it's different.
Yeah, and we'll come on to transitioning in a second. I picked up on the fact that you don't necessarily feel that you're brave because you may not have been at the front line. The thing is, though, that you've probably gone through a lot of experiences with the guys you've worked with, men and women, who have been there. So you've probably been exposed to the psychological effects of that and help them overcome that. And maybe how have you managed when you've had stories shared with you that might not be the Disney
Mhm.
bedtime story or once upon a time they lived happily ever after, because it's not at
Yes.
all that. So how did that
Yeah.
affect you, and how did you get your respite?
Right. That's a great question. And many times I do find, even though I've worked with individuals who can conquer the world, you know, who
Yeah.
aren't afraid of anything, sometimes the challenges they don't choose are the ones that get them a little confused and off
Mm,
balance,
mm,
and give them a loss of confidence. And for me, it is when I have some of those walk bys or walkthroughs, and they come and they tell me some pretty scary things, like I don't feel safe with myself anymore,
yeah.
and they're experiencing the darkest of times. I have my response in those moments is a highest level of gratitude. I'm so thankful to be in that moment with that person,
Mm,
because they've done so much and put themselves on the line. And then in that moment, I'm not afraid of what I mean, what's
yeah.
their
Yeah.
enemy, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. It does totally.
So it is rewarding in and of itself.
That's great. And it's interesting you say gratitude, because, because I know we both help veterans. Uh, and I think that forgiveness and gratitude are probably the two most important things, because, once you've forgiven, I've talked to people, and when I first went through the process myself, I thought, what am I forgiving them for? They're absolutely nasty. They've been nasty to me. I mean, what do I want to forgive them for? And it's not about them. It's totally about the person
No.
who's forgiving. Because do you know what? The person that you're forgiving, if they knew it was still affecting you and causing you anguish or anger, then they'd probably be glad. So the point is, the forgiveness is for you to be able to forget, if that makes sense. Because like you've got shock, denial, anger, forgiveness or acceptance, and then the gratitude
Right.
is great, isn't it, to be able to do that? So just explain the psychology behind that and how it works, if you could put it into uh, a snapshot of it, if that makes sense.
Sure. So the brain is wired for survival. That's a great thing, um, until you experience trauma. And then it takes a snapshot, right? So
Mm.
all of those cues that we mentioned earlier, kind of causing the anxiety, that's because your brain is doing its job. But the
Mm.
greatest thing about the brain is that it is pliable. It's always changing, and it's all about knowing how to change it. And gratitude is one of the ways that we know, not just emotionally, spiritually, um, it organically changes the shape, the way your brain works. And so, for example, if you've ever been in the market for a new vehicle, all of a sudden, you're studying the vehicle, you're reading
Mm.
about its specifications, and then all of a sudden it starts popping up everywhere, right?
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
they were always there, but you couldn't see them, you weren't seeing them. And so that's one way that gratitude can be really powerful, It's great to share gratitude, but to have a daily practice where you think about the things that you're grateful for, or even, like I said, in the moment, having the
Mm.
response of, wow, I'm so grateful for this, can really change your whole outlook on life. And what we know about the brain too is that once you start to have a more positive outlook, your brain literally becomes more open
Mm.
to other positive relationships and opportunities. So it
Yeah.
becomes exponential, and it can start with a small gratitude practice.
Thank you. And Barbara, I know that you would never ever see me as doing anything wrong when I was a young child in school. But actually, actually, there were a few times where my teacher would say, right, O'Connor, okay, O'Connor, right, I want you to write 100 lines of this. And they were usually a positive statement, right? So I suppose for gratitude, you could make a mantra for each morning to read it out, couldn't you? And that'd help.
You could, of course. And then I like there's a it's just called Three Good Things. And it's an exercise where every day, either in the morning and the evening, you think about three good things, three things you're grateful for. The trick of this one is that you can't repeat. So if today I say I'm grateful for my children, my husband, my home, tomorrow I have to choose something else. And that's one way to stretch those gratitude muscles and really start to change the brain, change the way your brain is seeing things as opportunities versus threats.
That's a really good tip. I suppose it works on the same basis that if you had to change everything 100% overnight, that's a big ask. If you change something 1% per day, that'd be a lot easier,
Right.
wouldn't it? Because then you get exponential growth. So that's fabulous. So when you left, because I suppose you did an internship, but you did serve for 5 years, and then you moved on to serve with civilian, where you were contracted into the military. Was your transition then a sort of slow thing, or when you left the military, did you recognize straight away that you were out?
So I had the blessing of becoming surprisingly pregnant with our son Jonas.
Right.
And my husband and I were both active duty. And of course, this was, 2013. So still the war was very active. And of course, in his job, he was going to continue to deploy a lot. And I was gone a lot for my job. And so really, it was just a matter of us taking stock of our priorities and what's most important. And I wanted to raise my own son. And so it was not an easy decision. I remember becoming very emotional, and I'm not like a super emotional person about relinquishing, being an officer in the army. However, I was still, again, so honored to support my husband. And at that time, I thought, even if I never work as an operational psychologist again, this is the right decision because
Mm.
my son,
Yeah, yeah,
is
yeah.
my top priority. But I did get to work, of course, as an operational psychologist, and it did help. But it was slow. So I took a few 2.5 years doing some part-time contracting and in the Army Reserves until I found the position that was right for me, supporting Air Force special operations. And that was again just another highlight. All of those years were highlights and just as memorable and important, I think, to me as my time in the service. It almost felt the same. So,
Thank you for that. How did you find that being a female in the military, in the army, was for you? Uh, when you became pregnant, surprisingly pregnant, as you put it, how did that affect
yeah.
your career? And what happened with your
Yeah.
subordinates and also you see your superiors?
So, great question. It can be, there's so many things flooding to my mind when you ask that question right now, Joe. But I would say that when I first got into the Army, they were very deliberate. And one of the things that we were taught as females was that there wasn't a lot of choice. Either you were kind of forced, especially in working in mostly male units. You had a decision and you were forced to kind of, because belonging is such a strong psychological need for
Yeah.
people, typically you could either be promiscuous or you could be mean. They had another word for it, a female dog. But I won't say that. And but I thought to myself, no, I'm a professional. There has to be other ways for me to operate. And I do feel like I found the balance. And I do feel like all of my male and female coworkers were I respected them and they respected me. Did I have my run-ins with the disrespectful? Of course.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Of course. But I would, that could happen going to the grocery store, Joe. So,
Yeah.
that's how I took it. I said, I don't want to be promiscuous and I don't want to be mean. I want to be myself and I want to be professional. And I feel like I was able to make that happen. Whenever I became pregnant, there are those thoughts of like, there's these, I see male operational psychologists, they're getting to deploy a lot, they're getting to stay in the service. And you could be tempted to say, woe is me. But
Yeah.
my past, that is not a good option. That's
No.
not a good option because I am who I am, and I've been given a gift of a child. That is a very important gift, and I'm going to treat it as such. And then my life will just take on a different look. It doesn't mean I'm less important, right? It doesn't mean I'm less than as an operational psychologist or as a person who can contribute to the service. It just means that it looks different.
Do you like coffee? A lot of people tend to spend money on expensive coffees from outlets without even thinking about it. Well, for the price of just 2 coffees per month, you can gain access to valuable business and life resources gained from my over 37 years in business and 15 years in the military. These world-class resources are designed to help you achieve the goals, dreams, and aspirations you deserve. So visit joeteams.com now to find out more. That's JOETEAMS.com to find out more.
Different.
Thank you. So what I'm getting from that really is stuff goes on. And you were very diplomatic in how you approached it, because I know behind those comments, there will be loads of stuff going on, maybe even broaching on misogynistic comments. And the fact is that it's how you handle it and it's how you interpret what's going on. Because what I've discovered is, like, when someone, apart from going through forgiveness process, when someone is nasty, you don't know what's going on in their life at that time.
Right.
Really.
Right.
And I used a process where I think, well, if I was in their shoes, what would I be doing, and what's behind what they're saying? So I think that from your training as a child with your mum and your brothers, and then also as you come through military career, you've just been, it seems to me that you're just able to reflect, review, and assess what's going on in an instance. Does that make sense?
It does. You're probably giving me too much credit. I would say that it's always been, it was instilled in me early that faith, that character, are necessary for a good life. And because those things were instilled in me early, not because of anything I did,
No.
right? But those lessons continue to build.
And I mean, we do, both of us stand on the shoulder of giants, because
right.
because everything that's gone before us, we've picked up on, and you've gone down the
Yes.
psychology route, and I know you're really great at it. And I gone down the business route and helping veterans with that. So, but
Right.
I don't know everything, and I still don't. Every day's a school day. So, what
Right.
what challenges? I mean, apart from the obvious, like bringing up children, because you've got more than one child now, haven't you? Yeah. What challenges
Yes.
did
Together we
you?
have
Sorry,
five.
five.
Oh, I just said together we have five.
Five, yeah. So that's that's your work cut out, really, with five children. And what what challenges did you face on the, whether it be psychological or being apart? What challenges did you face when you were transitioning from the military?
Yeah, I think that because when you decide to serve, whether you feel like you're going to be in the line of danger or not, you do have to sign the same paper, that you are in essence like that your life is sacrificial, right? Like if it comes down to it, you will give your life for this. And I'm not sure about a lot of civilian careers, but I doubt that they can legally ask you to give your life, but it takes on a psychological form of meaning for people, which is great, right? It helps us become committed to our jobs. It helps us form really tight bonds as
Mm.
teammates. So those are the things you miss when you leave. Of course, it's only natural. So that sense of purpose, your teammates, those were the things that I missed immediately. And how did I How did I combat that? I did more writing. I'm not like a big writer, but I did want to renew my mind every day, knowing that those were things lacking for me mentally, spiritually, psychologically, that I missed having that sense of purpose and that connection to my teammates. I had to keep telling myself the truth, right? Forcing the truth down my throat and tying those daily tasks that didn't seem important at the surface to a greater meaning. Because of course, like when you're nursing a baby, you don't feel like you're doing anything great. But that baby's now 10 years old, and one day he'll be a man. And I do believe that he'll be doing something great, and I'll have a part of that.
Yeah, exactly. And it's, parenting is just a great gift, isn't it? It's just brilliant,
Yes.
especially when you can get them to do something they wouldn't have done had you not been there. I mean, that is a great gift. So I know most people talk about success and what's the secret behind success. I like I like talking about failure, because if all we ever had was success, there'd be no contrast in life, and it'd be pretty boring. So, and so I imagine, right, that you failed a few times, haven't you?
Yeah, all the time.
Yeah.
Every day.
And how do you deal with it when you do?
So it is having kids, it does bring you some great perspective because immediately for me anyway, I'm always thinking like how do I want to teach my kids to respond to this? So when you do have kids and all kinds of other things on your plate, I fail in the forgetting area. If I don't, write things down, I will forget small details, right? And those are opportunities to teach grace. So for my kids, for example, and humility, I think as well. So I tell my kids often, yeah, I mess up every day. Like I don't want them to be afraid of failure at all. I want them to go towards challenges. And it's hard. It is really hard for me to talk about failure because there's just so little I consider to be a failure in the first place.
Yeah.
I mess up, I make mistakes. The real failure would be in taking those personally or attributing it to some kind of character flaw that's not going to change. And I just don't
Mm.
believe in any of that. And so I just try to take each mistake as an opportunity to grow and learn. I want, to apologize quickly. I want to be humble about the areas I need to grow in. And I know that's probably not as specific as
No,
you
no,
were wanting, but
it is actually. It's very specific because I use the term feedback is failure is the feedback of champions, or feedback is the food of champions, and also fail is first attempt in learning, right? And like you,
right.
I only think that true failure is when you give in and give up.
Yes.
Because so long as you get back up then and you do it again and you maybe change things a little and then you get there, well then that's what failure's for, isn't it? And
Yes.
and you know, in the military, you would have developed a social network like the strength you would not be able to match ever. The fact is, now that you've been out of the military for some time, how have you built your network, and how important do you think it is to have a good social and business network?
I think it is extremely important. And it's something that we all downplay when we're in the service because all of the people, I mean, not all of the people we care about, but we're surrounded by people that we do care about. And we don't feel any need, right? We don't feel any need at all to expand our network because the work we're doing is meaningful already. When
Yeah.
we transition out, it becomes extremely important.
Mm,
And one honestly, so keeping in touch with and expanding my social network kind of became a full-time job for me once I transitioned out of my last position. And it has been the most beautiful thing. I am an introvert, and it was work, right? It was work, but it has been so absolutely rewarding. My podcast has come out of it. That's been birthed out of just making these connections and thinking like, the rest of the world needs to hear these stories. I've been able to volunteer with a nonprofit called Shields and Stripes, which was born out of my last unit. One of the operators who was there decided that he was going to build this nonprofit to give holistic care to veterans and first responders that maybe didn't get it, while they were
yeah,
in.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So every day is an adventure. I meet someone new, and it is like keeping the fire lit, and
And
all of us are lights.
yeah.
Just
Oh,
like meeting you, you reached out, but it's like just thinking about getting to talk with you and like thinking about what you're doing inspires me and keeps my light
wow.
lit.
Thank
And
you.
I really
That's
that
fabulous.
even yeah,
And
it
how do
doesn't seem
how
it
do
seems
oh sorry. How do people get in touch with Shield and
no,
Stripes,
that's okay.
and what can they do? Tell us a bit more about that, Shield and Stripes, and then tell me about your podcast too.
So Shields and Stripes is formed after we have these teams, multidisciplinary teams in our special operations units that help our operators thrive. So
Mm,
they are typically comprised of strength and conditioning coaches, dietitians, physical therapists, medical doctors,
yeah.
social workers, psychologists, right? And we don't, here in the US anyway, our care is very compartmentalized. And so what we know is that the mind and the body are connected, right? And so you need to move, you need to talk, you need to form connections. All of these things are important for healing. But the way that our care is set up here, like you have to go to one place to talk to someone, right? And then you have to go to a different place if you want
Yeah.
to learn how to move your body. Then you have to go to a different place if you want to learn how to fix your body. Well, what he's done is just recreated the teams we have in the special operations unit for people who haven't experienced that type of care.
Mm.
And he runs we of course take applications and then choose about 8 different folks that will do the cohort together. It's a 3-week intensive experience, and then it's a
Right.
3-month follow-up. But we do it as a group because we know how powerful those connections are. And you find your new teammates and things like that. So that's Shields and Stripes. You can just go to shieldsandstripes.org to learn more about it. All of us are volunteers. It's a full volunteer staff, kind of similar when I guess you are paid in the Army, but you volunteer. And then the podcast is just called In the Name of Service. And I love to tell people's stories. Similar to you, Joe, I want people to know that there is no specific pedigree, there's no specific background that you need to make the impact you know you were born to make.
Have you ever wondered what is going to happen to all your knowledge, wisdom, and skills when you die? Yeah, me too. That is exactly the reason why I created joeteam.com, so I can leave a legacy for my children and for other successful people who are just like you. For less than 40 pence per day, you get access to valuable business and life resources gained from my over 37 years in business and 15 years in the military. These world-class resources are designed to help you achieve the goals, dreams, and aspirations you deserve. So visit joeteams.com now to find out more. That's joeteams.com, joeteams.com to find out more.
And I believe by sharing those stories, it catalyzes people out there to start creating one of their own.
Yeah, so just say that podcast again, the podcast name, so the guys can tune
In
into
the name
it.
of service. Yeah, it's called In the Name of Service.
That's brilliant. And, you know, we talked about standing on the shoulder of giants and the fact that we are who we are today because of the people who've guided us. So looking back on your childhood, career, military and civilian, how important do you think it is to have a good coach and or mentor?
I think it's fundamental. I think that it's wise to seek counsel. It's wise to bring other people in. All of those kind of cliches that you've heard, that two minds are better than one, iron sharpens iron, all of those are absolutely true. When you bring people into the fold, you experience, I think, exponential growth because we only have one perspective. We can see ourselves from one perspective. And when we bring other people in, we get additional feedback that helps us grow and make us better, and then get additional insight from a different perspective. And I can think of, people specifically who have told me things that I, wasn't thinking were truth about me, that helped me become exponentially more effective in and helped my confidence, helped my belief, and also were able to give specific guidance that I probably wouldn't have come up with on my own.
Yeah, and that's great to learn that and discover that, because I think that other people's perspective is always important. I was giving a presentation at a meeting and there were about 25 people in there, and I said, right guys, how many meetings do you think's going on? How many presentations? And they said one. I said, no, forget that. I said, there's 26. I said, because there's the one I think I'm giving, and then I've got 25 other ones going on that you think I'm giving. And I'll get feedback. And
Yeah.
kids are great to give presentations to, aren't they? Because they don't hold anything back. If they don't like it, they'll let you know straight away. And I always like going
It's
into
awesome.
schools.
Yeah.
So I guess out of the guys that I've spoken to and had guests on my podcast, I reckon you are pretty high up there on knowing the answer to this question, right? And giving your perspective. How transferable from your knowledge, from your experience in working with guys leaving the military, men and women, and helping them overcome psychological barriers and limiting beliefs, how important do you think the skills are that they learn in the military to civilian life?
Mm-hmm. 'Cause, 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 'cause there's no measure for it. There is no measure for the value of being a good teammate or an ideal teammate, someone that is humble, because if you aren't humble, you are unable to grow. You are
Mm.
unable to learn, right? Someone who's driven, right? Who's going to keep working and not give up, and someone that has been around a diverse group of people, who has those people smarts, can build relationships with those three characteristics. Honestly, you can learn to do anything and be effective in any role, and that's how you have to operate if you want to be successful in the military. And so I think all of those skills are outside any of the technical skills that individuals learn in their specific career fields within the military.
Thank you. And the Columbo question, just one more thing, because we're coming to the end, because I know you've got loads of responsibilities to crack on and look after your family. Before I do ask the Columbo question, how can people get in touch with you? I know you've got massive plans to go ahead now. You've moved to a place, you've got your own plot of land with your husband and family, and you're chilling, you're discovering things. Tell us a bit about what you're doing there and how people can get in touch, because I think it's amazing what you're doing.
Sure. So, well, it's always been my husband's dream to own a large piece of property. And so he knows what he's doing. I would say it's brave on my part, because I've never lived like in a super rural
Yeah.
environment, but now we have 30 acres of our own, and we're trying to do as much as we can ourselves here to take care of things. So I'm learning a lot. That's what I'm doing right now. I'm learning a lot, and I'm humbled every day. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I am just what I seek to do right now is I want to seek wisdom daily. I want to plan around um, creating social relationships, right? In order to encourage people to go after that desire, that interest that lies in their heart. And when they've already done that and they're tired and they're discouraged, then that's when I want to be an encourager for them. And so that's my full focus right now. And I feel like I'm doing that through my volunteer work and through the podcast. But I would encourage anyone, honestly. I've had people reach out and say, because I'm very big into fitness and CrossFit, like they'll ask questions just about that, or they'll ask questions about, how to start their own podcast, or just some kind of random, I'm struggling with this, I'm struggling with that. I'm open to all of it. I just want to encourage people. I want to go towards challenge, and I want us to do it collaboratively. So LinkedIn is probably the best place to reach out to me initially, and you can
Yeah, yeah.
find me there, Barbara Thompson. Mm-hmm.
Which is the way we met, of course. And I've listened to your
Yes.
podcast. Yeah, and your podcast is absolutely fantastic. And yeah, in the name of service, and I've listened to it, and I like the style as well. It's really cool, which is brilliant. And I think you're genuine. I'd like to meet your husband maybe one day, and maybe I'll come out to the 38 acres and pitch a 10. So,
Yes.
so long as you don't throw me off.
You're more than welcome. It's beautiful.
Thank you. So the Columbo question for you is, what's the one thing, top tip, that you would give, maybe if you were looking at a younger self, a younger you, what would be the one tip that you would give to a veteran or a business owner who's tuning into this show now?
Yeah. Oh, you could say so many things. I would say that um the possibilities are always beyond what you can see.
Right.
So you may see a number of things in front of you. You may see a number of things behind you, but that is not the full picture. That is never the full picture. And we can fill in the possibilities. And obviously, I would say that on a positive, right? Um, but I do believe that faith is foundational, that it starts with belief,
Mhm.
and that when you have a belief, and sometimes you need help, right? Like I need encouragement from other people, and I'm sure you do as well along the
Yep,
way.
you're
But
dead
when you
right.
have a belief, nothing can stop you. So that's what I would say. There's always more to the picture.
Thank you, Barbara Thompson. It's been my pleasure to get together with you today for our chat on the podcast, Veterans to Success. The host of In the Name of Service. I will bid you farewell. Thank you very much for your service. And until we meet again, have a brilliant day.
All right. Thank you so much, Joe. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Take care. JoeTeams.com is a resource I have created to fulfill my mission to help 1 million veterans and business entrepreneurs like you achieve the goals, dreams, and aspirations they deserve. JoeTeams.com is jam-packed full of valuable resources specifically designed to help you on your journey to success. Visit JoeTeams.com now to find out how you can join and start your journey to success immediately. That's JoeTeams.com, JoeTeams, JoeTeams.com. And until we meet again, have a brilliant day.